Medical innovation starts with medical discussion. Talking about the future and what comes next with Project Medtech.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lindsay Deneen, Director of Marketing and Engagement at Project Medtech, and welcome to another episode of the Project Medtech podcast. If we can help you in any way, or you would like to suggest a future guest, you can email us at info@projectmedtech.com. If conversations like this are helpful, that's exactly why we bring people together at our signature events, the Midwest Showcase, the Startup Symposium, and Coming to America. For more on our events that include networking, education, and pitch competitions for startups, check them out at www.projectmedtech.com. We even have sponsorship options if your company is also dedicated to accelerating medical technology to impact patient lives. So reach out today to get involved. The Project Medtech podcast is proudly sponsored by Ward Law. Ward Law Office LLC is a boutique law firm specializing in the practice of patent and trademark law. They are committed to providing inventors, entrepreneurs, and businesses of all types with personal and professional services and are flexible to meet your unique needs. It is their goal to both educate on how to secure valuable patent and trademark protection and to provide high-quality services at rates affordable to independent inventors, startups, and small businesses alike. Without further ado, let's dive in.
Okay. Jenny Lynn, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So this is part of a Giant Shoulders event that you had attended back in January, where you pitched and won, I believe, right? You got first place. So part of first place was, there's some different sponsors gave away prizes. One of ours was the podcast, and I'm super excited to have you on. However, that wasn't the first time we met. We met back in October of 25 in Roanoke, Virginia. But for the listeners, I'm familiar. I've seen the pitch. I've seen the product. But an introduction to you and who you are, and then what you're currently doing.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for having me. And like you said, we met in Roanoke. And, you just recently had a guest on from Roanoke as well, from Crillian. And it's interesting because when I read and I hear, different guests, they always lead with like, I'm a formally led scientist, or, oh, I used to be, in my past life, a doctor, or something along those lines. I am none of those things. I am first and foremost a mom. And I came into issues with breastfeeding, and I really was frustrated, right? So I'm really coming at this solution, approaching it from a patient perspective. And for context, when I first went through birthing and breastfeeding, I was actually in Australia. So I lived 11,000 miles away from friends and family. And and I got to experience and have the privilege of experiencing national healthcare and what that looks like. And even despite having national healthcare and access to a lot of support, community support and midwives, I struggled. My daughter had a undiagnosed tongue tie that was not caught until 7 weeks. She was malnourished, failing to thrive, and really a very scary time. But beyond the scary component, it was really this shame that I felt as well, this failure already coming into motherhood. I've underfed my baby type feelings. And then fast forward, moved back to the United States, had another baby, and really got to see it from another lens of knowing what is possible, but also wanting to ensure that I could put these safeguards in place that I didn't have to go through this again. And it was far more of a isolated experience, really having to curate, cultivate these types of services and pay for them.
So I love the background, love the patient perspective. I want to get to the solution. But yeah, I know you mentioned that a lot of guests like, oh, I was a scientist or a physician before this, that sort of thing. What were you doing before this, though? Like,
So I
yeah,
was
because I think your background's important here, because one way or the other, you chose to be an entrepreneur, right? And so, yeah, I'd love to hear your background, though.
absolutely. S- So education-wise, I am in marketing. I had a BA in communication, a master's of arts in applied design and visual arts, and so that really does help in terms of visually showcasing the problem to
And
people that might not
yeah,
understand it.
makes total sense. Time out. Yeah, I mean, this is the least a bit surprising thing when you said that, because um, uh, if any for anyone who's listening in, we will have a link here for Jenny Lynn's LinkedIn and the website, and you need to check these things out, because the way Jenny Lynn writes is. I find it very, very clever. And so the fact that you just said you had a marketing and a communications major makes total sense. But keep going.
And, I wanna also lead just I know we are all a function of where we were raised and what our experiences was, and so I am a daughter of a parent with chronic illness. And really so for context, I grew up, in a suburb of Houston, Pasadena, Texas, and really surrounded by the medical center of Houston, which is renowned. And it also feels very familiar to me. So being in hospitals, being, the sounds, the smells, all of those things are not something that I find frightening. It's been normalized in my family. And then as time would go on, I too experienced chronic illness and actually was a patient for quite an extensive period of time, missed a lot of school. And really and this is like formative years. So I missed primarily my 8th and ninth grade year. And really that just kind of catapulted me in wanting to go into the medical field. But I I just didn't feel I felt comfortable and I always wanted to help patients, but just the time, the investment, the financial investment, it just was quite cost prohibitive. And so, I kind of pivoted obviously into more of the marketing side. And through iterations of my career, and I've gone through very different verticals, from architecture to software to manufacturing, and then my last role was in health tech. And it's interesting too because you can see really this types of shapings of like how can we put the patients back into the driver's seat and make decisions that are clinically validated, or you have this clinical evidence that can support these decisions and they take control of their health, because ultimately at the end of the day that they have to live with this is their life.
Yeah, that's great. Um, I love understanding the background of why people are in med tech and health tech in general. Just I think that if you're going to take the entrepreneurial journey, there's got to be some driving force that is going to keep you going through those difficult times, because you have ups and you have downs, and um, if you're only financially motivated, it just won't take you far enough through those lows. Anyone can ride the highs. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. Okay, so let's talk about uh, you kind of led into the problem of what you're doing. Let's talk a little bit about the company, the solution, when you started it, what made you finally go, okay, I'm going to start a company. I'm going to go do this. And yeah, I'd love to get that story.
So milkmade, like the idea, the tasting of it, like I even named it. Like at this was we're talking 10 years ago. I was like, why? Like why? This is my QVC moment. So just for context, and I'll just hold this up to the screen.
Yep.
So this is a nipple shield. Here's another one. So you can go, you can see that there's holes in the top. So you wear this on your breast. They are a sheath, a barrier for nipple trauma, pain, inverted nipples. So there's latch issues if the baby can't latch properly. So there's many reasons why you would be using them. And I will put an asterisk here that there is, in the infant feeding space, there is contention. So there are some people that don't believe that you need them or that you should use them, or they can become a crutch. But if you're struggling with those things that I just referenced, this is really the bridge between not breastfeeding and breastfeeding. And so I was using them because, again, my daughter, just for context, it was tongue tied. I did not know this. Plus, she was evaluated and was not, it was a misdiagnosis. It felt like breastfeeding felt like you were breastfeeding a piranha, right? Like, this is like there are shards of glass on you because it's not an appropriate feeding mechanism and fit and placement within her mouth. So using these, loving them, hating them, like, I shouldn't be having to use this, but also as her weight is going down, I'm now having to do weighted feeds. So a weighted feed looks like you weigh the baby, you strip them down to a diaper, weigh the baby, then you breastfeed them from one side, weigh them, breastfeed them from the other side, weigh them. And here, now you're doing this whole math equation of how much are they getting. Then some lactation consultants also want you to pump after breastfeeding to see how much milk was left in the breast. We now know that that's not necessarily an accurate portrayal because your body is constantly replenishing if it's being extracted. But through this exercise, you're able to start formulating some type of problem or non-problem. And it was clear she was not intaking enough to meet her required growth goals and to stay on her trajectory. That was one data set. So you then are checking out a hospital grade scale. You're, needing to calibrate this. You're needing to do all of these things. I'm doing this on pen and paper. And I ended up leaving just, for a few hours. My husband, I needed him to, to step in to do this. And there was something that happened, like either she was still dressed, something that completely threw my values out. And I'm like, this is insane. This is absolutely insane. And as I say, my QVC moment is there has to be a better way. I'm already using this nipple shield. Why isn't this providing any type of data and not even just data, but continuous data that I could have multiple through the day, through the week of data sets to ensure that she was intaking enough.
Yeah. I mean, this is, I'm sure you have the stats behind this, so feel free to share them. But I'm sure this affects more moms than people realize. I know that there's quite a few people that I know in my life that have had issues with this, that have wanted to do it but couldn't, and from my vantage point, the one piece that you kind of talked about that I'm not sure is like quantifiable, or maybe you can quantify it, is just the time of this, the stress of this. Like, it's just this is like a huge snowball effect in my mind. It's like you have these things happen, it's painful, um and there's those things that I'll never experience that, but I can watch the time and the stress it causes on people. And that's the other piece of this. Like, this isn't, when you're having issues like this, it is a huge time commitment to go through this. And like, we're talking about brand new moms. It's not like there's a shortage of things for them to do. So that's the thing that, like, as you're talking about this, where my head went, just from watching some of the experiences of people I know, is just how stressful this could be, and the cause, and what that does not just in terms of breastfeeding, but other areas of life as well. So, but I'd love to hear about, if you have stats about how many people are affected by this. I think that also maybe talking a little bit about the importance of breastfeeding, like this is the best way to give your baby nutrition. So maybe expand a little bit on that, because I think that was really interesting, I think, in your pitch that you did.
And this is what I love, right? Is we have this fairy tale that is told to us and presented to us, that and we see it, like whether it's told to us or not. I mean, you go to any art museum. So I formerly taught art history. I was an adjunct instructor, and you see these gorgeous pictures of Madonna and Child, and Mary and Jesus. I mean, mom plus baby is this beautiful, serene picture. And then you have, from the clinician side, right? Breastfeeding is the gold standard. Why is it the gold standard? For one, just by producing breast milk, just by offering you're already reducing your breast and ovarian cancer rates. Like, there is a diminishing of rate that you could get these cancers. So just from that perspective, fantastic. But then from the perspective of the baby and being a recipient of this milk, human milk, and I'll break these two into two separate categories. So if you're breastfeeding directly from the breast, those contents of milk is different. So for that perspective, you are helping your baby with antibodies. This is really helping to support their gut microbiome, microbiota. And again, reductions of things like SIDS, asthma, eczema. Like, I mean, it's just, I could go on and on about this, but as we can imagine, pediatric cancers are on a rise, cancers as a whole are on a rise. And so what can we really do to help offset this? And then from the formula perspective, and again, this is not a shaming conversation of breastfeeding and or formula feeding, but just the fact that formula, the way that it's prepared, the way that it's stored, there can be spores lurking within the cans. And you've seen formula shortages, which really put parents in a huge bind. So the more support that we can have to help increase breastfeeding. And so to the stats, we know that in the US specifically, that there's an 84% of initiation rate for breastfeeding. What that is telling us is parents want to breastfeed. They are already bringing the baby to the breast. They're already trialing this. What ends up happening is by the 6-month mark, 74% are no longer exclusively breastfeeding. So if you look at this on a graph, I mean, it's a cliff. And there's certain further drop-offs, right? So we can see also, again, we can make these types of statements like paid parental leave is also in there. Like when people start going back to work, we can see that the drop-off rates for breastfeeding start so early before, and again, every state is different, every family dynamic is different of when a family needs to go back to work without paid parental leave. But it means that breastfeeding is already failing so early. And it's happening so early because we don't have support. There is a perception that moms aren't making enough. And that's the number one reason for breastfeeding cessation is perceived low milk supply and actual low milk supply. And it's like, okay, well, why do we need to highlight the two differences? It's almost saying like, you have a car in your driveway and you have the keys, but you don't know if there's gas in it, so I'm not going to drive it. If people are having a perception that they're not making enough or their baby's not making enough, let's empower them with those decisions and also provide them with agency if there's other people that are possibly putting this type of judgment on them and saying, I don't think you're making enough. I'm going to dive into that in a minute. But also low milk supply. So other countries prescribe medication for low milk supply. So there are galactagogue. There's in Australia where I was, it was very common to be prescribed Motilium or domperidone. UK, Canada, there is medications for low milk supply that can help boost milk productivity. In the US, we do not do it. So if we could start capturing the level of low milk supply and really talk about it, and there's a conversation that, people view breastfeeding as, again, very easy. There's no problems here, but yet we know that our bodies have many flaws, right? Like we have diabetes, we have hypertension, we have obesity rates, we have preeclampsia, postpartum hemorrhaging, cesareans, all of those things can impact our ability to make milk.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, and I think too, like there's this whole other factor of it as well, which is just the stress of being a new mom and thinking about, is my baby getting enough food or not, right? Like I just think about, there's quite a few personalities that would probably be
Mhm.
like, yeah, it'd be nice to know, is my baby getting enough food? And those moments, like for people who aren't parents, like everyone goes through it. Those nights where you're up at 1 in the morning thinking like, is it because they're not eating enough? Like, what's the
Yes.
issue? I don't know. So anyway, so yeah, tell me about the actual product. You said you named it 10 years ago. But where are you at now in this journey? What is the product? And let's keep going on that story.
So you had mentioned, and I asked like, well, where did this come from? So when I was working at a software company,
Mhm.
they were able to patent a piece of code. And I remember I went out to lunch. This was what, like, in the height of keto phase. And so we went out for like a only meat burger kind of thing. And I was like, how did you do this? Like, how did this even, because that's very rare to be able to patent code. And so having this conversation, and I told him about milkmade, and it couldn't have gone better because it was one of those, like, just shoot your shot. Like, just try it. Just, why don't you reach out? Like, get a lawyer, see what's available, and do it. And it took me a little while to work up the courage to do that and have that conversation. And when I talk about that courage, of what really brought me there was, I was now at this stage working for a manufacturing company, and I was supposed to be in Singapore. This was in February. And there was this weird virus that was spreading in early 2020 that was like, nope, we're going to cancel your trip. And it just happened to be in a time when I didn't need to be anywhere because I was going to be in Singapore. So I ended up being on a wait list to do my CLC, my certified lactation counselor course. Did it. I was the last cohort to be in person for a very long time.
Right.
Got out of that, and I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make the switch and the pivot to going into lactation, and the world shut down. And so I got involved into Dr. Brittany Bretto's femtech focused podcast listening sessions, where I was just listening over and over again to women and, femtech companies that were seeing these problems and solutioning them. Well, one of my largest problems was I needed I need people. I need to access people. So remote patient monitoring started creeping up, telehealth started becoming normalized. Met my patent lawyer, so filed my non-provisional, or I filed my provisional patent in 2023, my non-provisional in 2024, and then have been working with agencies to help build out milkmade. So really ensuring that Milkmaid is not just this consumer device, but really have the backing of clinical evidence, clinical support. So ensuring that when we talk about where breastfeeding fails, it often is happening already in hospitals. It's already happening at day 0 or day
Mhm.
1 when, so just for context, in the US, it is an especially, in a hospital birth setting, it is very common to be given IV fluids. Those IV fluids have to go somewhere. So those babies that are being born, their weight is bloated, bloviated for lack of a better word. And there are some calls to say, let's start weighing the baby 24 hours after they're born. But for hospitals that are looking at this weight and continuously weighing the baby, they're seeing significant drop-offs that are from these fluids. And they are associating that with insufficient feeding. And it's already starting to say, okay, well, now we already need to intervene. So it's almost, as the saying is, a cascade of intervention. They're already intervening. So with Milkmaid and being able to bring this into a hospital setting and start providing context and data insights, or as we call actionable insights, so lactation actionable data, that will also provide this shaping for the parent and the provider that the baby is intaking enough milk.
Mhm. So you mentioned a piece in there about clinical data. Is this regulated by the FDA as a medical device? And then also, you know, even if the answer is yes, I assume that it's probably a 510(k) or potentially as a de novo submission. Either way, I answer that question, but then I want to know how you're looking at the importance of clinical data, because this is something we talk exhaustively about with clients of Project Medtech and even on the podcast everywhere, which is just there's always a rush to get to revenue. And I think that investors probably are the ones who are kind of pushing for that, but you can't miss the important step of like clinically validating your product, because if you don't do that, no one's going to use it, no one's going to purchase it, the reimbursement's not going to cover it. So yeah, walk me through the regulation, but then walk me through how you're evaluating clinical data and the importance of gathering that.
So going down this pathway, again, a lot of this is a learning curve. And when there was this thought, again, is this a consumer device, right? Is this a class 1? Nipple shields are class 1, but the more valuable that Milkmaid can be has pushed Milkmaid onto it's a class 2. And again, thinking, oh, well, there's got to be a predicate out there, right? Because there's other people that are looking to solve this problem as well. I'm not the only one thinking that this is a problem. There is no predicate currently, as of February 2026, to help make going into market easier. So we are de novo class 2. And then for the clinical side, when we look at just how the system is set up as a whole for moms and parents, it really is, no surprise how siloed it is, the failing rates. And if you think about it as like, so the mom sees an OBGYN, or the birthing parent sees an OBGYN, and then the baby sees a pediatrician. And the pediatrician is not seeing the mom, even though when it comes to, now there are some pediatricians that specialize in breastfeeding medicine. There's some double board certified. So we'll also say that there are definitely pediatricians that can help capture the, as I call it, the duality of breastfeeding. But then mom and babies often are not seeing a lactation consultant until something's already wrong or something's already not working, which could mean that they're already behind the 8 ball because breastfeeding works on hormones need to be working efficiently. There also needs to be this supply and demand. So it's also ensuring that you're meeting your baby's demands. You're not just necessarily feeding every 3 hours. You're looking at their cues. Like these are things that, one, not everybody goes to a childbirth education class. Two, not everybody can afford these types of support systems. And three, not everybody can access them. If they don't have access to transportation, then how do we do that? And that's really where to have that clinical validation to be able to help patients remotely. I'm in rural Virginia. We are 40 minutes away from a hospital or from breastfeeding medicine. And I mean, there's some places that, we had a pediatrician out here and they've left. Like those are the types of communities that I want to help support and ensure that if we're talking about which communities need breastfeeding the most and helping to have this foundational access to health at the beginning, again, are these rural communities because already our food sources aren't the best. We don't have a Whole Foods, we don't have a Sprouts, we don't have these like, for lack of a better word, but like bougie stores that are accessible. You have to drive, significantly length of time to get there.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the rural piece is such an interesting area. We see so many more of these hospitals with that serve a rural population, developing innovation centers within the hospital, not even to innovate like inside out, but outside in, and go find some
Mhm.
of the best technologies that they might be able to deploy for their population of individuals they support. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that aspect up. Um, okay, let me ask you this: what has been your biggest learning experience as a entrepreneur so far? You've been at it a while and working at it, and you're taking on. Not only are you taking on a regulated medical device, you're taking on a de novo submission, right? Which is a class up from a 510K. Now, I don't think that's a lot of people try to force themselves into a 510K. But I think that de novos are a nice indicator that, hey, there's no one else like you on the market. But regardless, marketing communication, right? You're getting into medical device. What's been the biggest learning curve so far for you?
Being an entrepreneur is, I did not have this on my bingo card 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. So there is a level up that you referenced this early on about if you were in it just for the highs, like it's probably not going to work out for you because there are lows. And no matter how important milkmaid is or how valuable access to human milk is, there still is this business piece that I do need investment. I do need to have these investors. And more often than not, they do not look like me. They look like you. And you are having to convey not just this is really important. There is like fundamentally, this is super important that, babies and lactators, moms all have the ability to make milk and receive milk. And that actually impacts all human beings, all communities. that's really not the angle that they want to see. They want to see financial projections. They want to see, cost of goods. They want to see their return on investment, and not even just a return, but, you know, a a real return on their investment. And that is a different shaping, from my mindset. Yes, it is a business. Yes, we need to be profitable. But when you're looking to get something off the ground and something that is, and again, it's like I get these questions like, oh, is this a passion project? No, this is a legitimate business. This is not just because I'm passionate about it, doesn't mean that. And again, I want to highlight this is just our MVP. The Smart Nipple Shield is one of many pieces that are going to help disrupt and completely empower parents on their infant feeding journey. But you have to convey a completely different message, and it's almost pervasive of where that people are going to pay for it so that the investors that are making money into this space are going to win when I see people using milkmade is going to win.
Yeah, so you're hitting on a couple things here. Um, the We talked about this. You will be episode 250 something of the podcast. We
Okay.
talked about on episode 13 with Dr. Brandy Baldwin. This was back in August, at the end of August of 2020. And she was bringing up a point. I had asked a question about, at that time, she'd given some stats about how many female founders received investment from VC. And I don't remember the stat, but it's in the single digits. It was alarming, right? Um, and, and then there was even a smaller percentage of that were female founders in femtech. Um, and when we talked about that, like what you're describing is, with any entrepreneur has to, at the end of the day, convince an investor that they are, if it's not philanthropic, is going to get they can see themselves investing money and getting a return in a reasonable amount of time for a lot more money than they put in. And that's like that the core, that's what you have to do. But the issue that Dr. Brandy Baldwin was bringing up was that for femtech products, because she gave another stat. Again, it could have changed, but 5 years ago, it hasn't changed a material amount, which was how many women were in venture capital. And that was the real issue, right? Because so this was what she was kind of talking about, was the issue she was seeing is that if someone goes to um, an investment group and says, I am, you know, I have a new ablation technology and I'm going to help people in AFib. Males and females alike can go, cool. I know someone affected by that. I get it. I've understood it. Right. But the issue in femtech is if the people you're pitching don't understand your product and don't understand and have never experienced that could be the issue that they can't get over right off the rip, right? Well, is it really that big of a problem? Is it that big of a deal? And so to your point um, about that, that is a difficult barrier to overcome. And like the only reason um, uh, I can relate to what you are talking about here today is because my wife went through some of these similar things, right? Especially around breastfeeding and pumping and what's best and how long can you go for and the stresses of it. I mean, I've seen that firsthand, but I've only experienced it from the stress and time commitment side, right? And so I totally understand what you're saying, and that is a not only do you have to convince everyone that they can see a return and there's a business model here, but you have to convince them of the clinical problem that they probably may or may not understand, and that's a daunting task. So kudos to you for jumping into all of this. Um, I'm curious how have you um, made an attempt to bridge that gap in some of those scenarios?
you know, every day is a new day, and every new day brings an opportunity to learn. And one insight that I've had is possibly I hurt myself or hurt the business by going after this femtech, women's health, maternal versus would milkmaid had been more receptive if we were a pediatric device. And that's an interesting thought of like, if we just pivoted from a, pivoted just again, segmentation, like this is a device that would help both parties, but in terms of in terms of the VC lens, would they have been more receptive earlier on for milkmaid if we had just focused on talking about infants and newborns and the benefit of breastfeeding? Because like what you're echoing, you are an ally to lactation because you've seen it, you've witnessed it. Just like they used to say that women's health was niche, which is wild, or let alone menopause is niche. I'm trying to change the whole messaging as a whole and say everybody that's around this boardroom could have benefited from, well, first of all, we're all milkmaid. So whether you're formula based, breastfeeding directly from the breast, and or pumped milk, we are all in. Milk is infant feeding's first food. So of those choices, and there is nuances between pumping and breastfeeding because you're losing the receptor feedback. Your milk is not, your areola is not entering into the baby's mouth, which means you're not having this communication where your milk is changing. So of those types of infant feeding, if we can talk about good, better, best, and everybody that's around this boardroom table making decisions, financial decisions, what would you have wanted? Or if you were to have children, what would you want for them? And would you want this being lack of insight to be the reason that you went through that good, better, best scenario?
Yeah, that's really insightful. So let me ask you one question to end it. If there's for the other early stage entrepreneurs out there listening in, or anyone else who's interested in medtech, what is one book you might recommend that they read that you found insightful or helpful?
Oh gosh. It's not, I think this isn't so much necessarily an entrepreneur book, but Invisible Women, I think was for me was such a fire setter. Like, if you're taking away from this, it's just like how ingrained bias is into the everyday activities. It is imperative that we name it, like see it, name it, change it. And we have to be able to have those types of conversations. And that book, again, I know that that is like a femtech um, holy grail, right? Like um, in terms of just how that's action, where you can start seeing changes in markets. I think there was just the first woman test dummy for cars not
Mm.
that long ago, like relatively. And that was called out. Like that
Mhm.
was called out in the book. And that's where, when we can start mission selling, which is kind of the space that I'm in, right? Where I have to go into these conversations of why formula isn't the preferred feeding, why breastfeeding is the preferred. Like there is a mission component depending on audience. So if they're not an ally like yourself, I have to go into that. But the more that we have these conversations, then this starts becoming the status quo of known information. And I don't have to go that far back. Now I can actually start talking about what the product does, why this improves infant feeding and lactation as a whole. and say, we don't want to suffer, and we shouldn't have to suffer through this period of postpartum and parenthood.
Mhm. I love it. I will give my wife and I have two daughters, so we read a lot of children's books around this, and there is a book. So I've been quoting different children's books uh, frequently on LinkedIn, and in the spirit of the one you just gave. I will give the one She Persisted. It was 13 American Women Who Changed the World. It's a great children's book. So if you have daughters, you should get that book and read that to them. My daughters love that one. We'll include links for both of these books in the show notes, but thanks for sharing that. And to your point, like you said about the crash dummy one, I just saw one of the comedians my wife and I like is Tom Segura, and he did a recent skit about him going to the Masters in Augusta, Georgia, and he was doing this joke about when they admitted their first woman, and it was 2012, like 2012 was the first year a woman was in this golf club. And it's like, he's doing it as a joke. But then you sit there and you're like, it's pretty crazy that that's a legitimate stat. But anyways, I'm digressing. Jenny Lynn, thank you so much for being on. Hang on for 1 minute. We'll chat offline. We'll include the links to the book you recommended, the LinkedIn, your LinkedIn, Milkmade's website. So for anyone who wants to find out information, up or down an inch depending on the platform, click on it. You can go straight there. But Jenny Lynn, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you and this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Freddie Coffey, Director of Marketing at Jumpstart. The Project Medtech podcast is proudly sponsored by Jumpstart Inc. Jumpstart's Trailblazer Accelerator helps Ohio's most innovative early-stage health tech startups fast-track their growth with tailored advising from serial entrepreneurs, non-dilutive funding to fuel their journey, and unrivaled access to a network of experts, resources, and investment opportunities. Whether it's improving patient outcomes, advancing digital health, or reimagining care delivery, Jumpstart provides the high-impact services and critical resources to bring big ideas to life. Learn more at jumpstartinc.org/startups.
Thank you for listening. At our core, we at Project Medtech are networkers, educators, and consultants. We meet you where you are to bring value and to create impact. We care deeply about helping medtech companies succeed right from the start, through to exit, by providing consulting and fractional services, hosting impactful industry events, and of course, sharing incredible guest insights like the ones you heard today through our podcast. Please reach out at any time if we can be of assistance. Check out our website at www.projectmedtech.com or email us at info@projectmedtech.com.